Well, viewers, welcome to the latest video. So we're just looking at these pieces of the motor, and we see the spark plugs here. The spark plug is just a piece of wire, and they do sometimes put resistance in there to suppress the radio. So I've actually been on this, and we just cleared a little section just here of all the rust and corrosion, and here too, and we're not getting anything. So I'm pretty sure that these might well be defective spark plugs by now. But they are quite old, so you're not getting anything at all. We should do so. If I measure the resistance of this one, I get about 5 megohm, which I think is way too high. And this one I get about 30 megohm, which is the better looking one, right, to be honest. So I'm probably going to replace those, and they are pretty cheap, so we'll leave that at that for the moment. So the two coils, this is one of the coils, and it says Stifa to Super TT. You can't get these anymore, but you can get I don't know what you might call a generic Chinese coil, which kind of looks a bit like this, which we'll probably be able to use to replace this with if it's faulty. So if I go between the ground and the ground, then it's obviously between there and there we're getting, but that piece of metal goes from one side to the other and has the coil windings on it, so you would expect that. So since there's only one terminal on this coil, you would expect that the low voltage winding on the coil, which goes round and round, because it's what's called an auto transformer. It only has one winding. So at one end you get 20,000 volts, and the other end you've basically got just your, I think it'll be somewhere around 6 or 12 volts on a motor like this. So you can see there we're getting continuity, so there's a chance that these may work. And we've got the other one, and then test that one. But what we're actually seeing there is quite a bit of corrosion. So when you put the probes onto a good clean spot of metal, you do get a good signal. So normally when you have a coil winding on a ferrous iron core like this, you don't want the winding to go to the core, but this is a single terminal coil, so in order to put the positive on there and get an earth so that you can get energy into the coil, it has to earth back through the frame. So that's why that terminal is connected to the ferrous piece, and the electricity would go through the nuts that hold this on, which is another good reason, if you want a good spark, to actually keep them clean. Put them on with a bit of Vaseline or something to keep the dirt and the corrosion off, especially if you're going in the sea. So this is the terminal where you get the 20,000 volts, of course, and I'm not getting a connection to that at the moment, so I'm assuming that is because you've got a huge inductance in there and the multimeter probably doesn't like it. Okay, so the leads are going to the coil. So both of these are testing as dis. So I think effectively if we, that's my check, and then we go inside onto clean metal, we'll get nothing, absolutely nothing. So these are faulty, and I might just try to repair them temporarily just to try and start the engine. So inside you've essentially got these four parts. Well, it's on the outside. So this little spring here, which goes over the end of the spark plug, inserts into your cable like that, and then the rubber piece goes onto the end like that. So if I go between the two ends like that, and then stick the probe down the hole, there you go. You can see that there's nothing wrong with the actual spark plug wire, even though it's a bit old and crusty. And so the likelihood of where the fault lies is probably here, where this is actually a steel spring. Let me just demonstrate that. It goes onto the end of the spark plug like that, and I think that if I clean up the end of that wire tip, it'll probably work again. And I'm going to do it for both of them, and then I'm going to seal them back up with an insulator, which is basically window sealing silicone, which is also waterproof, of course, because it's window sealing silicone. One thing I wanted to cover was the way that these are connected. So essentially this and this, inside here there's a screw, like a self-tapping screw, and you basically put that in and then you wind it around and round and round. That's the old-fashioned way of doing it. So the problem with that for a marine engine is that there isn't any water seal on this bit. For a HT system, that's really bad. This one actually is pretty tight, and would have been more tight when it was originally made. Well, there isn't much water seal on that either. And this, I think, would be tight over the spark plug. So I think when we put this back together, we might just use a bit of silicone sealer or something to keep the water out. Okay, so you can see there we've reinserted the metal spike. I cleaned it up with a file so that it was nice and shiny, and then reinserted it into the unit. So if we test this now with the multimeter, yeah, see that? Good strong signal. So you can kind of see the state of this one here. Look at the rust on that. So by the time I finish with that, it will work. That's got to be disassembled and reassembled, really. So the way that we got these off was by making a cut just here and only down to there, so that you retain this bit. And this will then be filled with window sealer silicone, which I can just show you there. So we also seal that gap there, and you can just see it. There you go. You see how rusty that is? So that's why it wasn't making a connection. You're never going to get a connection with that. But this is also a lesson in HT generally. Always worth making sure everything's connected properly and sorted out. Okay, so just taking a look at this carburettor system. So I've got, well, this, I think this is the air screw, and I have measured where it sits, so now I'll put it back. This particular screw is a little bit rusty on the end there, that needs sorting out. And then we've got this here, which is freed up. That is actually the, if you look there, it's the throttle adjustment. This is the piece that goes onto the engine to vary the venturi. And that is working perfectly. It's nice and clean too. On the other side, on the earlier video, you saw the choke was stuck, so it's still not that brilliant, but it is doing the job okay. If you look at it, it's sealing on that side, and there's a huge hole in it anyway, so it's not supposed to seal perfectly. It's supposed to have a little bit of air going through. That's why it's called a choke. So that looks like it's working okay. This is your choke lever, which has a ridiculously long thread on it, and it's hard to get off. So that's been wire brushed, and that's okay. That's moving just fine. There's no problem with that. So if we look at the other side and take this out, this is where the fuel goes in, and it's nice and clean inside. Maybe not so much on the outside. Right, so this is going to get cleaned out with carb cleaner, and we'll check the jets on it. The jet there is marked 85, so I'm not sure of how representative that is. So we'll have a look at that and see if there's anything that's stuck inside it. But if you look at the bowl, actually not too bad, you know. It's not terribly unclean or anything like that. So hey, that's the state of the carb, and it doesn't really come apart much more than that, except for the needle. So what I'm going to do is we'll stick that in some cleaner, carb cleaner, and we'll get everything cleaned up and everything. Make sure all the passageways can blow through and that. And that's the state of the carb. So then we've got the reed valves. Now they do look in good condition, and you can see a little bit of daylight out of one side of them. So not quite sure what to do about that at the moment. But it's not, I mean, they're not terrible. You know, they're pretty good really. There is quite a hardened rubber seal around the edge there, which might be an idea to replace, maybe. So as far as the gaskets are concerned, you probably can't get them, and you can make them quite easily, so that's not too big a handicap. They are not in very good condition. If you look at the carb gasket on that side, actually that's alright. It's not really terrible or anything. And I'm not going to peel it off, because if you peel it off, that's when it starts to break. But we can put that back on with a bit of silicone sealer, and it should be just fine. Well, that brings us to the end of this little video. Thanks so much for watching, folks. Bye.